On February 16, 1969, civilian electronics engineer Barry L. Canon was sent down underwater to repair a leak aboard the Sealab 3. Whilst repairing the leak, Canon suffered from natural health complications and would pass away. What the rest of the crew did not know was that it might not have been so natural after all. In October 1942, American physician Albert R. Behnke returned to Washington and soon after opened the Naval Medical Research Institute, NMRI. Behnke's main focus and interest was centered around how physical fitness and fat content affects inert gas eliminations, and began projects to evaluate the relationship between the two. We have since deemed Behnke as the modern-day father of human body composition for his pioneering studies of hydrostatic weighing in 1942, the development of a reference man and woman model, and somatogram based on anthropometric measurements underlie much current work in body composition assessment. When the people of occupied Germany began suffering from starvation, Behnke put his science on the back burner, instead focusing his attention to finding ways to increase their food ration. George F. Bond was born on November 14, 1915 in Willoughby, Ohio. Bond attended the University of Florida and graduated in 1939 with a Bachelor and Master of Arts. Afterwards, he attended medical school and completed his medical training surgery in 1945 at McGill University. He completed his internship at the Memorial Hospital in Charlotte, North Carolina. He then opened and established the Valley Clinic and Hospital in 1948. For this, he was recognized as Doctor of the Year in 1953. He also made an appearance on television to discuss his accomplishments, which gave him national recognition. Because of this national coverage, his work was noticed by the United States Navy, who broached him with the idea of taking his talents there. After mulling it over, he agreed and entered active Navy service. His accomplishments never faltered, as after joining, he soon qualified as a diving and submarine medical officer, and then served as Squadron Medical Office from 1954 to 1958. It was here that Bond would be introduced to Albert R. Behnke's research. Bond was fascinated by the analysis and the capabilities it posed, and with his newfound status, pushed for funding, which he received. In 1957, Bond began the Genesis Project. Motivated by Behnke's research and passion for the cause, Bond set out to prove that humans could in fact withstand prolonged exposure to different breathing gases and increased environmental pressures. Once saturation is achieved, the amount of time needed for decompression depends on the depth in gases inhaled. This would help further establish the United States Navy's use of saturation diving. Genesis was conducted in phases, with phases A and B taking place over 1957 and 1958. They involved exposing rats to saturation with various breathing gases, with Phase A resulting in all the vermin tested on dying from the gases. Phase B was much improved, and by the time every experiment was completed, there were no fatalities amongst the animals. Because of this, Bond proposed offering the opportunity for development of ecological systems, which would permit man, as a free agent, to live and work to depths at 600 feet, and for periods in excess of 30 days. This proposal was rejected, deemed too outlandish and optimistic. So the experiments were put on hold. But then, in 1962, interest in helium-oxygen atmospheres for crewed spaceflights made the next phase in Genesis possible. The rest of the Genesis project went relatively smoothly, with Bond summarizing it with this. As a result of some 6 years of animal and human studies involving closed ecological systems, elevated pressures, and synthetic atmospheres, the stage has been set for operational application of the work. It would now appear that we can safely station men at any point on the submerged continental shelf, with a reasonable expectancy of useful performance for prolonged periods of time. Following the Genesis project's success, the Navy employed Bond in initiating and serving as the senior medical officer and principal investigator of the United States Navy Sealab program. The Sealab experiments looked to build off of the Genesis project's findings. Sealabs 1, 2, and 3 were experimental underwater habitats developed by the United States Navy to prove the viability of saturation diving and humans living in isolation for extended periods of time. The knowledge gained from the Sealab expeditions helped advance the science of deep-sea diving and rescue, and contributed to the understanding of the psychological and physiological strains humans can endure. But the successes of these experiments weren't left without some turmoil. Both Sealabs 1 and 2 flourished with funding and support from the Navy, but Sealab 3 was riddled with issues from the start. Due to the United States' involvement in the Vietnam War, the project was delayed almost 4 years due to constrained funding. And by the time the project was finally underway, tensions were high, The USS Elk River was specially fitted as a Sealab operations support ship, but the project was 18 months late and $3 million over budget by the time Sealab 3 was lowered to 610 feet, or 190 meters off San Clemente Island, California, on February 15, 1969. Sealab team members were tense and frustrated by these delays and began taking risks to make things work. When a poorly sized neoprene seal caused helium to leak from the habitat at an unacceptable rate, 4 divers volunteered to repair the leak in place rather than lifting the habitat to the surface. One of these divers was Barry L. Canon. Barry L. Canon was born on March 22, 1935 in Williston, Florida. He was brought up by his grandmother. Canon was a bright young child, eager and with a smile on his face at all times. Everyone he met had something nice to say about him. The captain of his football team, Canon graduated from Williston High School in 1953. Right out of high school, Canon joined the United States Navy and served 4 years, becoming a mineman second class. After serving, he decided to pursue his academics, graduating from the University of Florida in 1962 with a Bachelor of Science degree in electronic engineering. Canon was a civilian electronics engineer at the U.S. Navy Mine Defense Laboratory in Panama City, Florida, where he designed intercommunication systems. From August 28 to September 12, 1965, Canon served on the first crew of Sealab 2 near La Jolla, California. He received the Navy's Superior Civilian Service Award for his participation in the project. In 1969, Canon was assigned to Team 1 for the Sealab 3 project. He, along with 3 other members, were assigned to open and secure the habitat. On February 16, 1969, the Sealab 3 habitat sprang a leak. Canon and the other members were sent down to Sealab in the Personal Transfer Capsule, PTC, in an attempt to repair the problem. Their first attempt was unsuccessful, and the divers had been awake for 20 hours using amphetamines to stay alert for a second attempt. At around 5 a.m., Canon began to feel strange. He was working on the exterior of the habitat, along with fellow dive mate Robert A. Barth. He motioned to Barth, but he couldn't really make out what was wrong. It was then that he suddenly began to convulse. Barth did all he could to save Canon, holding his head in the breathable gas pocket of the skirt surrounding the Sealab's entrance. He tried to force the emergency aqua lung regulator mouthpiece in between Canon's death, but it was no use. He dragged Canon into the PTC, where the other 2 dive mates began CPR, but it was clear that their attempts were futile. Canon was dead. Bond and the rest of the Sealab members were mortified. They had lost one of their own. An investigation took place, and Surgeon Commander John Rawls suggested that Canon might have been suffering from hypothermia during the dive, which led to his death. But soon after, something much more sinister was discovered. It was revealed that Canon's rebreather was missing beryllium, the chemical necessary to remove carbon dioxide. This sucked the life out of the entire crew. Foul play. Someone set out to harm members of the crew, but why? According to U.S. Navy's head of the Deep Submergence Systems Project, DSSP, John Pena Craven revealed that while the other divers were undergoing the week-long decompression, repeated attempts were made to sabotage their air supply by an unknown force. The investigation was further continued, and a potentially unstable suspect was identified by the staff psychiatrist. Whilst in custody, the suspect was thoroughly interrogated, but no substantial evidence or confessions were revealed. Due to this and the incoming media storm that the Navy was about to catch due to Canon's death, the suspect was released, never prosecuted. The Sealab program came to a screeching halt, with many of the members never recovering from the horrific event they encountered. There were attempts to revive the project, but ultimately the shadow of Canon's death was too much to overcome, and the Sealab 3 was scrapped. Barry L. Canon's killer was never found. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please subscribe and leave a like so we can continue to bring you these stories each week. If you have a video suggestion, please leave a comment down below. Until next time.